This is Dr. Stephen with FLiFF magazine. We're here at the Museum of Discovery and Science, also called MODS. We're here with a special film brought to you by the Fort Lauderdale International Film Festival. We have with us Jonathan Bird and Zach Peterson. The film is called Ancient Caves. Now, I told them before, I feel like I'm playing chopsticks in front of Beethoven because they're professional filmmakers, and I am here with my little iPhone talking to them about this fantastic film. It's in 3D. You all shot it in caves, underwater. Tell us about the film and the shooting of it.
Well, we love to make underwater documentaries.
Okay.
And a few years ago, I got fascinated with cave diving. And I thought, caves would make an amazing subject for a giant screen film. And that's kind of where the whole idea started. It was, let's make a cave diving movie that's the best cave diving movie ever. And it kind of expanded from there.
So you were chatting before and telling us about the cameras.
Yeah.
And how the technology is so different. Tell us about the cameras that you made. That was fascinating. We were talking about upstairs.
Well, when we started this project, which was about 4 years ago, most giant screen films were still made on 15 perf 70 millimeter IMAX film.
Okay.
Which means you have a camera that's about this big, and if you put it in an underwater housing so it can go underwater, it's about this big, and it can only hold 1,000 feet of film, which gives you a 3-minute load. And this is a problem because if you want to go 3 hours or 4 hours into a cave to film, having only 3 minutes is a problem. And then how do you get light that far into the cave in order to be able to expose that film? So we had this idea to use the new high-end 6K digital cameras to do a giant screen film. And at the time, that was not really a workflow that was sort of blessed by the giant screen industry. So we started doing film tests with some cameras. And we found out that it was possible. But by the time we really got the project rolling, they had come out with 8K cameras. And the 8K cameras were actually, unlike the 6K cameras were almost as good as film. And the 8K cameras were better than film. So when we actually started working on this, we were one of the first productions to be using 8K digital cinema cameras to make giant screen films, IMAX films. And now kind of everybody's doing that, but we kind of pushed the envelope. But it wasn't because we were, trying to push the envelope. We needed to get the camera small enough that it would fit in the cave. That was the basic problem. The holes are small, and you got to squeeze through there, and the IMAX camera wouldn't fit.
Yeah. Let's play the trailer. Arthur's helping us back at the studio. We're shooting on location. We're having a lot of fun. So, Arthur, if you can play the trailer, we're going to let them see what the film is about.
Science is about finding answers. And how far you'll go to get those answers. One visionary scientist is on an epic quest to understand Earth's climate. Dr. Gina Mosley is looking for clues in the most remote and unlikely places. Caves. Stalagmites, thousands of years old, reveal secrets from the past. But some are accessible only to a brave few. At 300 feet below the Earth's surface, there is no light, no air, no room for error. Join this adventure into the world's most hidden realms and find out what it takes to solve Earth's greatest mysteries. Ancient Caves, a film for IMAX and giant screen theaters.
So we're here again at MODS, Museum of Discovery and Science, with the Fort Lauderdale International Film Festival, talking with Jonathan and Zach with Ancient Caves. You were telling us about the cameras, how fascinating the cameras are. What caves did you go to film it?
Well, we went all around the world. As far as submerged caves, we were in Devil's Hole in Nevada,
Okay.
and we were at the Crystal Caves of Abaco in Abaco, Bahamas.
Okay.
And the above water caves that we went to a cave in Mexico. We were in Grotte de Gournay in France, and we were in Spring Valley in Minnesota.
Okay. This is not just a tour of caves. This is an absolute immersion of the caves and seeing them. And some of them are underwater. Now, everyone's going to laugh because I'll tell it anyway. I can't swim. So watching this kind of gave me a little bit of a panic attack. But I feel like I should need a towel because the water actually feels like it's going to come out and get you. You're in some really tight spaces when you were filming it. Tell us a little something about that.
Well, the underwater sequences, we wanted to go to some caves that were really, really incredible. Mm-hmm. So the scientists we were working with were doing research in Devil's Hole, which is a cave that's completely closed by the Park Service because of a highly endangered fish that lives in there. And at the time we filmed in that cave, more people had walked on the moon than had been diving in Devil's Hole Cave. So it was a real honor to be given permission to get our team in there. And that really was just because the researchers were working there and we were helping with their research while we were making the film. So that was a cave diver awesome moment. A lot of cave divers that have a lot more experience than I do are jealous that we got to go and do that. So that was pretty cool. And the other cave we really wanted to film in was Abaco in the Bahamas because it is widely considered to be the most ornamented underwater cave in the world. And it's just so beautiful. It's like diving in a chandelier. And we just thought that on camera that place would be just spectacular. And I think it didn't disappoint in 3D, did it?
No way.
Oh man, we just watched this 3D version for the first time that we've seen it in IMAX. Literally, we made the film. That's the first time we've seen it in 3D IMAX just now. And I feel like I just got out of the water. I feel like it almost might look better on screen than it did when we were there.
It really is mind-blowing.
Yeah, at least I didn't have to worry about running out of air.
Yeah, that's true. Much safer.
Yeah. You were telling us about that too. You've got so much air to get in and so much air to get out, so much time on film. So all of that is very precious when you're trying to film something. It's not like us standing here with my iPhone where it's really cheap and inexpensive. It's very expensive when you talk about the time and effort that you put into that.
A lot of time. We have the sequence in the film that's the main cave diving sequence at the end. It's about 12 minutes.
Yeah.
And it took 14 days to film. So it was fun. I'm not complaining. I'd go back and do it again tomorrow. I had a blast. Blast.
And it's in 3D. This is the first 3D showing of the movie.
This is the world premiere of the 3D version of the film. The only people that have seen this in 3D are us and our 3D post supervisor, who saw it in LA at IMAX this week. And it's literally so hot off the press, nobody has seen it.
Yeah, and you're getting to talk to the people and see the people who made the film and who were there and actually made the film. That's very exciting. You were telling earlier, their enthusiasm for it is amazing. But it is a really great film. Again, you feel like you probably should bring your own snorkel because you feel like you are underwater with them, and it is so well done. It is so well done. The one thing I thought was interesting about the film is that the caves not only tell a little bit about the history, but they help us predict the future because of the carbon dioxide emissions that you all were talking about a little bit in the future. It's helping us to predict the future and helping us to remind us to take care of our planet better.
Well, that's the thing that came out of this that was the most surprising to me. So when we started the film, we just wanted to make a great IMAX movie about cave diving, right? But when we started looking for a story angle, we realized that there is an entire science called cave paleoclimatology that looks at climate change in the past from the deposits in caves. And so these scientists are learning about the past history of our planet by these formations that are basically frozen in stone in caves. They're amazing climate records. So they don't necessarily tell us anything about what is going to happen, but they give us a very accurate record of what did happen. For example, we can take an ice core sample up in the Arctic, and you can pull this ice core sample out, and you can look at the CO2 data by sampling the CO2 along this long ice core, and you can get a graph. But that graph doesn't have any dates on it. So it's kind of cool, but all it is a shape, because it doesn't tell you what the dates on the shape are. But what comes out of these caves puts the date on it, because we can date that information. And so then you can take that shape and you can lay it on top of the shape that came off of the ice core sample, and it actually makes that data set more useful. So this is a science that has actually greatly expanded our knowledge of what has happened in the Earth's climate in the past, which is really useful because this is the first time we've had that information with actual dates on it. This science is relatively new. I mean, it's in the last 10 years that this science has been invented. And that's what our film kind of revolves around, plus great cave diving.
It's really phenomenal. It's here at the IMAX, at the Museum of Discovery and Science, Sunday, November 22nd. Jan, what time are the films?
3 and 5.
3 and 5 p.m., November 22nd, Sunday afternoon here at the IMAX at the Museum of Discovery and Science in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
Come and see the film.
Yes, come and see the film.
Yeah, you have to see it in IMAX 3D.
If you miss it in 3D, you're missing out.
Yeah.
You gotta come see
Make
it.
sure you bring a towel because you're going to feel better. But it's a
Bring your
really
cave scarf.
phenomenal.
Yes.
It's a phenomenal film. Thank you guys for coming and sharing with us and being
Thank
part
you.
of the Fort Lauderdale International Film Festival. They're wonderful partners. So
Thanks.
thank you so much. All right, we'll see you here at Mods downtown Fort Lauderdale. Mods.
All at least 1,000, which means that you have 1/3 of your air in reserve, and that's for if you have a problem, if your buddy has a problem, if there's a delay, if Todd gets stuck in a hole, which he did.
Which he
And,
did, yeah.
No, and the funny thing is, people ask us, was that real?
Yeah. It was.
Look
yeah.
at his eyes.
See his eyes? Yeah. They got real big for a couple seconds.
He is stuck.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that Brian, who's the main character, was of the cave diving sequences. He was my cave diving instructor. Believe me when I tell you, there's nobody on the planet more fit to get him unstuck than Brian. So I wasn't like, oh my God. I was like, yeah, I'm going to film this. This is great because Brian's got this.
Yeah.
So yeah, but he actually did get stuck. Now, he did not get stuck on the actual dive that we went to Fanghorn. It was another one of the dives that we were way in there. So it was, it was plenty hair raising, but since we put 2 weeks of dives together into this, it was a different dive, but he did actually get stuck. We didn't fake that. And then when you get back to the entrance, you have to decompress because like you said, you're up against the clock.
Yeah.
So you can't come right up. We had like a 65-minute decompression obligation.
Oh, wow.
So that means that we have to work our way from 40 feet back up to the surface over about an hour.
Wow.
And so that's what that last tank is for, because that last tank is pure oxygen, which is toxic below 20 feet, believe it or not.
Oh,
But once you get above 20 feet, when you switch to pure oxygen, it purges the nitrogen out of your blood much faster. And so that's why we only had an hour. If we didn't have the pure oxygen, we would have had 2 hours of decompression, in which case we actually did not have enough gas with us. So that last cylinder of oxygen is your, it speeds everything up the last minute. So it was fun, man. I want to go do it again. I had so much fun doing that.
A lot of fun to watch.
I think you guys are all crazy.
I know, that's what everybody says.
I just look at it.
I love it. I love it. We had so much fun. And the interesting thing about the story is that, I just started out wanting to make a film about cave diving. I just want to go cave diving. I want to make a movie about cave diving, right? But you need a story. You can't just make a movie about cave diving. We didn't know anything about this paleoclimatology. I just started Googling like scientists working in caves, and things like that, and found out that, hey, there's this scientist in Minnesota that studies the climate using cave formations. That's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And I called him up. That was Larry Edwards, the guy that was in the film. And I said, hey, Dr. Edwards, can we make a film about your work? And he goes, yeah, that would be great. And I said, can we go with you into a cave? And he's like, oh, I don't go in caves. I was like, what? He goes, oh, I got grad students for getting the samples.
That's right.
And so I'm like, oh, well, who's your Indiana Jones, who gets your best samples? Who's the person who will make a good character for the film that does the adventure? And he goes, oh, you should talk to Gina. And then, he referred me to Gina, and I'm like, oh my God, his best scientist. She's British, and she's adorable, and she's like a rock star. She was awesome. So we had adventures. We went all over the world. We went to France with her, and we just followed her research. And she had never done any work underwater, but she wanted to. And so she said, we've got this research project at Devil's Hole, and we don't know how deep it is, and we wanted to do these deep samples, but we don't know anybody that can get them. And we said, we know a guy crazy enough to get those samples, and that was Brian. And Brian was like, I get to dive in Devil's Hole? Nobody, that's cave divers mecca. Nobody gets in there. It's closed. The Park Service is locked down. 2 divers died in the 70s, and they completely closed it down, and now they've got the pupfish there, which are completely endangered, most endangered fish in the world, I think. Yeah. And so nobody's allowed in there. And because University of Minnesota's got a research permit there, they got us in, so we got to do cave diving. And actually, at the time that we dove Devil's Hole, I don't think this is true now that we dove it, at the time we dove Devil's Hole, more people had walked on the moon than had been diving in that cave. Wow. So that was very, very special for us. All of our gear had to be completely disinfected before they would let us take it in there, because it was, they don't want to bring any contaminants in that would hurt the fish. So it was a super huge undertaking. We actually have a 30-minute behind the scenes film about filming at Devil's Hole that's on YouTube. That's pretty interesting to watch. It was all about that shoot, which was kind of fun. So, cool. In any case, yeah, it was so much fun to make. I was so bummed when it was done. Yeah, I was like, oh man.
How long was the whole process?
4 years.
Mm-hmm. How long? Sorry?
4 years. Yeah. And one of the problems that we had was, so I come from a television background. And I think that when I first started talking to people in the giant screen industry that I wanted to make this film, there's a lot of, naysayers and, well, he's a TV guy. What does he know about giant screen? He wants to shoot it in digital, And one of the things that I did is most giant screen films are scripted. Mm-hmm. And that is because historically, 70 millimeter film is too expensive to do it any other way. You know what I mean? You can't just take the 70 millimeter film costs $1,000 a minute to run in a film camera. Between the film, the processing, and the printing, it's $1,000 a minute. You don't go out and shoot it like it's a GoPro. You know what I mean? You don't shoot this like you're making YouTube videos, which is what we do. We make YouTube videos, right? And So we wanted to approach this film, because we're shooting it digital, we wanted to approach it like a television documentary. And in a good television documentary, it's not scripted. Like, you follow the characters and you see where the story goes, and you figure out the story arc kind of later, you know? And we wanted to do that with giant screen, and nobody's ever done that in giant screen. And because we were going to shoot digital, we could do that, you know? And that's how we want to do it. And when you're looking for money, and you're like going to somebody for some money, and they say, well, how's it end? And you're like, oh, I don't know. We didn't get to that part yet. Like, we didn't shoot it yet. We don't know how it ends. They laugh at you. That's the wrong answer. You should tell them how it ends and then change the end later. But live and learn. So, yeah, like, we didn't know how it was going to end. I said to Gina, how's this going to end? She's like, I don't know. We'll see what we find. We'll see what Brian brings up. What was really interesting is that we thought that the samples that Brian was going to bring up from deep water in Devil's Hole were going to prove, they had this hypothesis about a Milankovitch glitch that they were going to prove from these deep samples, and it disproved it.
Interesting.
And that was a major part of our story, right up until it disproved it. And then it was like, there's no point in explaining the science behind this hypothesis that turns out to be not true. You know what I mean? And so we were like, kind of left holding the bag, like, uh-oh. Like, that was kind of the crux of our story, and it just vanished because the water samples didn't prove what the scientists thought it was going to prove. So then we were just like, well, the hell with it, just keep filming, we'll see what happens, get to the end. And then, it turned out we got this great sample out of Abaco that actually did a lot to explain sea level changes. So Gina actually has, I think, 3 of her grad students now working on that sample, because it was, really cool for her. So, we actually got some really great science out of it. We got to be a part of the science as well as making the film. But, eventually what ended up happening was nobody wanted to put any money in. So we ended up funding most of the photography ourselves. And then once we had kind of a rough edit and everybody knew how it was going to end, then the Dome Consortium gave us some money to finish it and do everything. And so, then the movie got done, but it was like nobody wanted to put any money in until they knew if these crazy YouTubers were going to turn out a movie that was worth watching. So then we were like, yes, we got this great film, let's release. And we released it in March. And 1 week later, every IMAX theater in the world closed. So you were the first people to see the new 3D version.
Wow.
You were here.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was super fun. I'd love to go back and just do it again. I had a blast.
What's night and day between 2D and 3D? Because I saw it not in 3D.
Right.
Yeah, I was like, Now it just blew me away.
So I'll tell you another thing about this. So what you saw was a flat screen projection of the Dome version. So
so it had the.
So you'll notice there's a lot of fisheye shots in this. When I was growing up, the IMAX theater for my town, Boston, was the Mugar Omni Theater at the Museum of Science in Boston. And it's a dome. And I thought that all IMAX theaters were domes. I had never been to a 3D or a flat screen IMAX theater. The first time I went to a flat screen IMAX theater, I walked in and I was like, what the hell is this? That's not an IMAX screen. Like, it's not round. So when I found out that basically nobody was shooting films for domes anymore, and that was like a fad in the 70s, and like the domes were just showing flat screen movies on a dome, I had this great idea that my way to break into the giant screen industry was going to be, I was going to be the first guy in 35 years to make a film shot for domes. And I figured it just will never get shown on flat screens, but the domes are a pretty good market. All the domes are going to want it if it was shot on a dome. So I started shooting for the Dome, and I started showing footage at the GSCA conference, and McGillivray Freeman liked what they saw enough to pick us up and be our distributor. And they started saying, shh, knock it off with the dome thing. Like, don't just talk. all the theaters are going to want this. This is a cool film, just on the dome. And so I'm like, I don't know, it looks great on a dome, but I don't know, it's kind of boring on just a flat screen, you know what I mean? But then we had the 3D conversion done, and I think I actually like the 3D version better than the dome one, even though it was shot for domes.
It's spectacular.
The 3D came out so good. And it's funny because, you know, a few years ago, all the 3D purists would say, if you don't shoot in native 3D, it's not real 3D. But it's gotten to the point that the 3D conversion technology is so good, and it's cheaper than shooting 3D native. And so even Hollywood, nobody shoots 3D native anymore. Everything's converted. And the nice thing about when you convert is that you can control in post-production how hard it is on your eyes, and they can make it so that people don't get a headache. Whereas, I don't know if you remember, like in the early days of 3D, when you were watching a 3D film that was shot in native 3D, yeah, the 3D effect was really good. But sometimes it was so strong that people would be like, you know what I mean? Like, they can make it enough that it's cool, but it's gentle, so that people don't get sick and have eye strain and stuff. And so, but I have to say, I've never been much of a fan of like 3D Hollywood movies, but 3D IMAX movies are a different thing. Like 3D IMAX movies are always so well done, and they're so immersive, and the screen is so big, and they're like wildlife subjects, and it's like really being there with the elephants in the Serengeti, or, you know, sticking your head into a volcano, or like whatever. Like, I don't know, I think it really works in giant screen more than Hollywood. Because like fast cutting action movies in 3D just hurt your brain. But this kind of stuff, we have big, wide, immersive shots that are long enough for you to really look around. I think the medium works really well. So I'm just super. What do you think, Zach?
You've said it all.
I mean,
yeah, it's incredible.
I'm super stoked.
Yeah.
That looks amazing.
Yeah.